ask if you have any questions about task 1. Have you started it? Good. Okay. That's a good thing to do. Like I said, you don't want to wait until the very end and do that because that's something that you could do right now. Okay. Yes?
The part that talks about like age, ethnicity, and like IEPs of the classes, that's for one specific class period?
Yes, for you all, I know you have different class periods that it may be, or different periods, it may be the same concept, content, same grade level all the way through. You're just going to pick one to actually do your unit. Now you may, that's not true. You may do your unit with every single one of them, but you're only going to put one in your TPA. Yes?
Is that the same for the video? You're only going to video one class
Correct.
period? Okay.
Yes.
I was a little bit worried. I was like, I'm going to have 8 hours a day of
No, just one, just pick the class period that you want, okay? Anything else? Okay, so I can go ahead and start on task 2, but task 2 is about you getting ready to write your unit, teach your unit, etc. So you may or may not know what your unit is going to be about. Pretty soon, hopefully within the next few days, you will know what unit you're going to teach. There is a lesson plan template that we'll get to, which you've all used in the College of Ed, hopefully. But the first thing you're going to do is find the standards, the West Virginia Career and College Readiness Standards that go along with your unit. There may be 2 or 3 or 4, I don't know. But within those standards, you are going to come up with, and you're going to write, some measurable goals. So you may have a standard that has 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 things in it, and maybe you're only going to do one part of it. That's fine. But you're going to write a measurable goal, which we sometimes call objectives, but in the state document it's called a goal. The student will be able to, you're going to write those from the standards. Now, it does specifically say that you have to have at least 3 goals. That's not 3 goals per standard, that's 3 total goals. Some of you may have 10 or 12, and that's okay, but just keep in mind the more you have, the, I don't want to say it's going to be difficult because it's not, but more information you're going to have to gather, because we're next, on Wednesday we meet again, all of us together, elementary and secondary, and so we'll be looking at task 6, and you'll see some charts that you have to fill in about scores that students get on their pre and their post according to every single goal that you have. So it doesn't matter how many standards you have, you're just going to look at the standards that go with your unit. And then from those standards, you are going to write measurable goals, and as a total, you need to have at least 3. Yes?
Is that, the last chart, is that just for the one focus class? Or is that
Yes.
for all?
That's for your one focus class.
Okay.
Because this TPA is just on that particular class. Okay, now if you do everything in every single class, that's fine, but you're just going to write about one of them. So are we good on that? Okay. So if you look at task 2, we used to, and some of you may have been here that you remember the former lesson plan format that we had, where we had to put the big idea. Well, the big idea is not in our lesson plan currently in the College of Ed. However, it is in this document for the State Department. So you do have to come up with a big idea. And that is not an objective. That is not a standard. That is just a sentence or 2, kind of an overarching theme about your unit. Okay? So you don't want to put in that place, you don't want to put the student will be able to. It's just a sentence or 2 to kind of wrap up or kind of summarize, maybe that's a better word, kind of summarize in 1 or 2 sentences the content of your standard, of your unit. Okay, but it's not a goal or a standard. And then from that, it's kind of slow today. And then from that, you're going to have your standards, then you're going to do your measurable goals, your learning goals. And then in the narrative, and I'll show you these when they come up here, but in the narrative, there's a section for you to write about anticipated challenges. And these are things that that you anticipate could be issues with your unit with the class that you have. It could be because of maybe where the school is located. Maybe there's something you're going to do with topography or something, and from where the school is located, you can't actually see that in that area. Maybe you haven't, the example I used with the elementary students the other day, I'll use the opposite. So maybe you have a classroom of all females, and for whatever reason, you just think that because there's not any males in that classroom, there are going to be a few issues depending on your content that you're covering that you're anticipating are going to be problems. That's what you're going to write about in the narrative. So it's still working, but you can kind of see here, you can see the template. This is what you're going to type on. So you're going to put your big idea here. Is this a touch screen? Because I have a pad. Okay. And so then you're going to put your standards, and you want to copy those word for word from the West Virginia Department of Education page. Put the number and put everything. If you're only going to use pieces of the standard and not the whole thing, you can just highlight the pieces that you're using. That way we won't expect the goals for everything. And then you're going to write the learning goal or goals from that standard. And this, you should have at least 3 in this column. Okay? And then out here, you're going to do the level of the goals. So you, like Bloom's taxonomy, you want to kind of list the levels. You don't want to have them all at the factual level. On the other hand, you probably don't want to have them all at the analysis level too. But just kind of a variety. We like to see a variety of those levels based on your goals. Okay? Will you scroll down a little bit to the narrative part? And then at the narrative, this is where you're going to be talking about, like this will talk about how the goals you created for the lesson deepen the student understanding, things like that. And then one of them, so one of them, here's your anticipated challenges. Discuss and analyze in more detail anticipated student challenges that you're going to face based on the content that you're going to be teaching. Okay? Yes?
So, pretty much all the classes I have in co-taught.
Okay.
So, and it's for 12th grade civics.
Okay.
And so when I discuss some of those challenges, should I just discuss the fact that it's a co-taught class with various IEPs, learning styles?
You could do that. I would just really refrain from, I would probably refrain from saying that a lot of the anticipated challenges are because it's co-taught, because that kind of sounds like, and I'm not saying you
No, it
are,
sounds like
that
a
sounds like you're, exactly, sounds like a cop-out and you're blaming it on the other
That's what
person.
I'm worried about.
Yeah, and no, and I would just say this is a this is a co-taught class, and we see things differently, and just leave it at that, and then go ahead and say possibly some of the challenges will be because of that, and you might say if I'm teaching alone, on my own, then maybe it won't be, but I wouldn't focus so much on the reason I'm going to have challenges because I've got somebody else teaching with me and our styles are not the same or anything like that. But it's okay to mention that. Just don't
I was worried
focus
about
on it.
I didn't know if I should not mention it because,
Um,
kids, they work hard.
Right.
Just their lives. It's very many different
Okay.
styles, so.
It would be okay not to mention it too, unless at some point something comes up because it's a co-taught class. Maybe it's not even anything negative.
Yeah.
But if if that's going to come up somewhere, I would just mention it and leave it at that.
Okay.
But if you want to keep it out, that's fine.
Okay.
The only thing I can think of, and it probably, I mean, whoever's going to evaluate it may or may not pick up on it, would be during your video,
Yeah.
if there's some co-teaching there, or if the other teacher comes in and tries to do something, and, you know, we're thinking you're going solo here the whole time because you haven't mentioned it at all, and then there's this other teacher kind of taking over.
Yeah.
So that would be the only reason you might want to really mention it.
I think I answered my question. The difference
Okay.
between standards and learning goals, is that the learning goals are measurable? Is that, okay, gotcha.
And the standards are the exact word for word from the State Department.
Got it.
Oh,
Are the
sorry.
learning goals different than, like, in your lesson plan when you do learning objectives?
No.
Okay, they're the same thing?
Mhm.
So, like, you want less learning objectives, right? Because I have, like, there's some things in there that are, like, conceptual that build up to the learning goal that aren't, like, that, not their, I mean, you're gonna test them in, like, one question, like, just like a simple, like, define a term. But they need to understand that term to get this, to eventually get to the other goal that's gonna be part of the standard. So do I include those, like, mini goals, or do I just do, like, big overarching? Because if I did the mini, I'd have, like, a ton of them.
Right. I probably would do the big ones. And let me, after we talk about the pre and the post, see if that helps answer that question. And then if not, we'll come back to it. And the reason I kind of smiled there is because I just had, when you said less, I just had a student, or actually it was a faculty member come in and say that students have been contacting her because she's a supervisor, saying, I said less is better, and I didn't say that. I want you to know that the more learning goals you have, I hate to say the more work you're going to do, because I don't want that to limit you. But for elementary, they're covering all concept areas and so content areas, and so they have tons. So for them, it was a legitimate question for them to talk about, should we do less or more? But see if when we talk about pre and post, if that answers, and if not, we'll come back to it.
Okay, for the secondary level, you have to understand, she's coming from elementary, where they're writing, you know, it's not unheard of to have 20 objectives.
Right.
And so she just came from their meeting where she's trying to teach them, maybe 20 is a bit much. You guys are probably on the other
end.
extreme, so it shouldn't even really be an issue.
Right. And if you only have 3, that's fine, but just make sure that the ones you have, the standards that you have at least one goal from each of those standards, and that as a total in that learning goal column. And it is, the State Department uses the word goal, we usually use the word objective, but they're the same thing. Just make sure that you have at least a total of 3. Okay, yes.
Hopefully this isn't confusing, I started this earlier.
Okay.
So you have 3A, which is learning goals, 3B, which is level of goals. Those boxes should align, like I'm describing the level of 3B. Now, but you have standards also in this table. So the standards I put on the left, do those need to like follow like learning goals for that standard that's in that box, and then so on?
Let me see if I understood your question. I thought I knew what you were going to ask until the very end. So let's say that I'm going to use, I picked a particular standard here from the State Department. So when I look at that standard, I wrote 3 goals from it. So I'm going to put the standard here, and then probably what I'm going to do is I'm going to list learning goal 1, learning goal 2, learning goal 3. I'm not going to repeat it over here.
Right.
Okay, now, or you could make this box really big and list them all in there, 1, 2, and 3. It doesn't matter, but you do want to number them because later on, we're going to be referring to those as numbers. And then I want to, did I? No, I didn't.
Well, you answered that question,
Okay.
now I'm
You have
confused about
another,
something
okay.
else too though. So 3 learning goals, is that 3 learning goals per standard?
Mm-mm, it's 3
Just 3
total.
overall?
Yes,
Okay,
but
we can
if,
have as many standards.
right, but if you have, for every standard you have to at least have 1 learning goal.
Right. Okay.
So if you have 10 standards, you're going to have at least 10 goals. Now, you may say, oh, well, this standard, this standard, and this standard, I have 3. So you're going to have 3, 6, 9, and then the other 7, you're going to have 1 from.
Okay.
So you're going to be, those goals are going to be growing very quickly. Okay? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
How do you incorporate like the national standards in with your state standards?
Okay, so there is, in the rubric, there is a element that talks about national standards, state standards, and if you put the national standards in your unit, that's an well, as long as they're right and all that, That's how you can get a 4 on that particular element. That's an easy one to get a 4 on. I would just list them and make sure that you're saying, and most people recognize those, that they're national. But they're going to go in with the state standards, and so you just treat them the same way.
What organization are those, are national standards?
Okay, so it depends on your content area. Like social studies is National Council of Social Studies, NCSS. Now, I will tell, and so it depends on what your content is. English, same thing, National Council of English Teachers, NCET. NCTM, math. What you might find, or what you might not find, are those particular standards. I will tell you that most of the national organizations have gone to making them very difficult to find, and when you do find them, they want to charge you to look at them. I'm not exactly sure why. You know, they're not like gold. We used to have
They're not
a list.
secret.
I know, they're not secret. They want you to use them. I'm not sure why they're making you pay for them. We used to have a list. So if you have trouble finding them, send an email to, I'm going to dump this on you, on Mrs. Priest, and she'll get a hold of me if we can't, and we'll try to find a free copy. We used to have a bunch of them, but they change, some frequently, some not so much. So we may not have the most update version of them, but we'll help you find
And if you
those.
want to use national technology standards, those are available.
Okay, the ISTE ones?
Just click on the word standards and go to those.
Now they're not 2016 anymore, are they? That's not 2019, okay. Yes.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask, because in my last unit, I had, with social studies, standards just aren't there. So I had to use the national standards for like technology and for English, and that's perfectly acceptable to use the other standards to incorporate. Because we did the 20s, there's no standard English reading for the 20s for 6th grade, it's not there.
Yeah,
They
that-
skip a decade.
You can kind of mix and match too. Yes.
For the challenges, are you talking like cell phone usage in class or behavioral challenges for
Yes.
that question?
Yes,
Yeah.
but other challenges as well. I mean, you know, you've been observing for a little bit, so if you are observing your students and they're constantly on the cell phone and the teacher doesn't really even know or care, then you probably are thinking, oh my gosh, that's going to be a huge problem for me when I start teaching because I absolutely don't want them, or, you know, I don't care if they have them, but I don't want them to use while I'm talking, or whatever. So yes, you can write that, but also don't just focus on those ones. Focus on, you know, maybe you've looked and you can tell that they work better when they're in groups, and you may not have seen any of that yet. And you want to do some individual things, so you're wondering how working individually is going to impact their learning because everything they've done is in group work. Or because of the community, the way the makeup of the community works, there might be, maybe parents are coming in all the time and they just kind of wander in and out of your room and pull kids out. You know, maybe you've got students leaving the room all the time, and so that's going to be a challenge.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Are we good so far? Okay. So that's pretty much task 2. Any questions on task 2? Then we get to task 3. And task 3 is your assessment plan. So this is where you're going to talk about your pre and your post test. And like I said, you probably have an idea, or soon you will have an idea of your unit. And you need to write, for this particular assessment, your pre and your post are going to be the same. All right? Sometimes that's ideal, sometimes that's not. But for us, for you to look to see if there's been any growth We want it to be the same. Now, what you can do is you can mix the questions up. You know, if you're thinking, oh, I've got students who are just gonna memorize and, oops, I let it slip that the post-test was gonna be the same, and so maybe they're writing down stuff. You can switch the questions around, but you want to word them the same way. Maybe if you just alter a few words, that would be okay, but you've got to be really careful because otherwise you can't see if there's been any growth if you change questions, all right? Yes?
Could we keep the same questions, like, make them multiple choice on like the post-test, but like, not really short answer because of math, but like basically short answer on the
Okay.
pre-test?
Yes, you can do that, as long as it's the exact same question. Because you're looking for, now what you've got to be careful though is, with any multiple choice, you could have some good guessers.
Yeah.
So you may or may not be able to determine whether there's a lot of growth. I mean, you'll still be able to determine that, but then you have to think, was it a good guesser or whatever. So there's nothing wrong with having both of them open-ended with the math.
Yeah.
Because if they leave it blank, you've got a pretty good idea they don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Was there another hand over here?
Yeah, so I have, so I was thinking some of the multiple choice, you keep the STEM the same, but some of like the items
You
in
can
there,
switch those
switch, yeah, okay.
I'm teaching a novel for my unit plan, and I wasn't planning on doing like an objective assessment. I was gonna do like a performance assessment or another type of subjective testing method. Like, how is that gonna work?
Okay, so you kind of have to think of what you're going to do pre. And this is true for music majors, sometimes with the arts as well. You want to do something that's performance and not a written exam. So I've had students in English who say, well, I'm going to focus on writing a paper. So in the pre-test, maybe I'm going to ask questions about grammar issues, how paragraphs are formed, and things like that, and then I want to see it in the post. It's a little harder to work with that. I mean, like for a novel, I've heard some say, well, I'm going to talk about the parts of the novel. So I'm going to see, now, that would be a guessing game if you just pick a novel and they've never even heard of it, and you're saying what's the setting and the plot and all that kind of stuff. So think of the kinds of questions that you could pull from that for a pre, and how you could make it very similar on the post, even if it's not really asked the same way. Am I making any sense?
Yeah, I'm just like a little worried about how I'm gonna like institute that, because it's not like I'm gonna have reading quizzes, like pop quizzes on like, did you read? But like I'm not really at like where my students are at based on my observations and things my teacher has told me, like stuff like grammar and like that's kind of a like far off thing right now. Like we're mainly just worried about getting them interested in reading and writing.
Okay.
So I'm just like trying to think like with class discussions and like kind of like objective or subjective things like that work for like pre-assessment and formative, or like what's I guess like what would be the process for that?
Okay, so I'm trying to think here for a second, because you need a score on the whatever pre-test or whatever it is you're doing. You need to have a score, because when you look at the post, you're going to be comparing them. Okay. So I guess, I mean, the simplest thing to do, which is not real, although, well, it might not be a bad idea. Let's say you're going to have them read The Scarlet Letter. I don't know. Probably not. But anyway, so you're going to have them read that. So you're going to ask questions maybe about the content itself. If they've never read it, never heard about it, they're probably going to miss them all. So then when you give the post-test, hopefully after you've spent a week or two talking about it and reading it, they're going to get those questions correct. Now, if by, so I'm gonna go on with this. If by chance you give them the pretest and it's not something they can guess their way through, so you're not giving multiple choice or true, false, or fill in the blank, where they could possibly guess themselves a good grade, then let's say that everybody in the class got an 80%. That tells you that you shouldn't be teaching that because they already have that. Maybe they did a group reading assignment. You didn't know anything about it. They met after school and they all read this book and now they all understand it. So you're not going to do that. That's what the pretest is going to tell you. The pretest tells you, I know what I want to teach in my unit, but if they already know it, there's no sense in reading. I mean, there's no sense in doing that. I need to change it some way.
And you don't have to give a grade. Like, even grade.
Right.
It could be like an interest type, like she's saying, what do they know? What do they know afterwards, even though you're not giving, even though from a grading standpoint, you're grading these things that they're performing.
Right, when I said a score, you need a score for this. It doesn't have to be a grade in your grade book. And most of the time, teachers will say, this is just a pretest. I just want to see what you know. I'm not giving you a grade because I don't know. I like good grades. So I would be very upset if I went into a class and my very first grade was on something that was going to be taught to me after the fact, but I have to score some, whatever grade on it right now. So you do not have to grade that for your purposes, but you do need to have scores for the TPA. Let me go on and talk some more because I even thought when Dr. Watson was mentioning, maybe one of your focuses would be instead of the content of the novel, maybe you want to know, do they know things like not what the setting is of this particular novel, but what a setting is in general. So maybe you ask those kinds of questions on a pretest, and then you still ask them on the post-test, but maybe in addition to that, you ask them, okay, so what was the setting of this particular novel we read?
That's good.
Okay. So, yes.
So if I gave like a traditional type pretest,
Mhm.
how lengthy should it be?
Well, okay, so how lengthy should it be was the question. What you want to do is think of your unit, okay? Think of what you want to teach, and then you're going to write questions based on your learning goals. Now, and I'm going to talk about the whole pre-test, post-test, and if I don't specifically answer what you want me to do, let me know. If I were you, it doesn't have to be the copy that you give to the student, but on a copy for yourself, I would mark each question as to which learning goal it addresses, because that's going to come in very handy in task 6 when you have to do that. Otherwise, when you get there, you're going to have to go back and say, okay, question number 1 was, what learning goal was it to address, which would be fine. So you want to make sure that you cover all of your learning goals on your pretest, if they pertain to your unit, okay? So, that could be 5 questions. I'm not saying just 1 per question. You can have 10 questions on learning goal number 1, just so you cover all the aspects. But, so maybe this will help too. So on this chart, you're going to copy and paste the learning goals from task 2 that we just had, the second column. You're going to copy and paste them right in here in the first column. Then you're going to talk about which questions match that goal on your pre and your post. They're going to be the same thing, okay, unless you mix the order. So what evaluators would prefer you not do is on pretest say questions 1, 2, 6, and 8. Because then that means we have to go, which we will be looking, but if it's several pages or it's aligned some other way, it's going to be, we're going back and forth, back and forth. So if you could write the questions, unless they're paragraphs, you don't have to do that. But if they're just basic, not very many word questions, put them there so we can see them. Same thing is going to be true for your posts. Those are going to be identical. If it matches one learning goal on your pre-test, it's gonna match the same learning goal on your post-test. The only difference might be if you reordered it or something, and you just wanna put different numbers, but same questions. Formative, those are things that you're doing throughout the lesson that match that particular learning goal, okay? My elementary majors hear me say all the time, I'm not a huge, actually, I hate the word worksheet, but it depends on how it's used in the classroom. You know, when I went to school, worksheets were used as the teacher has something to do, so we're gonna give you a bunch of worksheets and you all just, you know, do whatever because I've got something else to do. There's nothing wrong with it being an activity sheet that goes along with the lesson, as long as it's not busy work. But that, you know, you may not have that same feeling as I do. But anyway, anything you do that's formative, you're going to write there. Maybe it's a project that the students are working on. Whatever it happens to be. Okay? So that's how that second column is going to be filled out. Yes?
So does every, like, goal that we have above have to be in this section? So we can only put like goals up there that we can measure with this assessment, is that correct?
On the first part?
Yeah, so on part, let's see here, 2,
Mhm.
task 2, every one of those goals has to be in this table on task 3, is that true?
Okay, so that question kind of came up in the elementary group too. And what I said was, and really their question was, do we have to ask a question pertaining to each goal on the pre and the post test?
So, for example, if I have one that's performing,
Okay,
and the other ones are on my written test, is that okay?
Yes.
That I have performing even though it's not on the written
yes,
test?
yes. And when you go back to that, you know, students will be able to, it's hard to measure, know, understand, know, yes, if you're asking a specific question, but understand, how do you measure understanding? I mean, there are ways to do it, but just as a broad statement, those are hard to do. So, and let me just mention one other thing, because this may not come up with you, but it does with the elementary group quite a bit. But let's say they're going to teach a science unit. And within that science unit, some of the things they're going to do, maybe at the end, they're going to write a paper. And so, of course, they need to concentrate on paragraph formation and sentence structure and punctuation and spelling and all that. But that's not really the unit. The unit was about this science, whatever they're doing. So those things you don't necessarily put on the pre and the post because it's not part of your unit. Yes.
So I'm a phys ed and health major,
Okay.
and I'm teaching both. For my phys ed classes, would like a skills tracker work as a pre and post?
Yes.
Okay.
And as long as you're doing the same,
Yeah.
same types, yes.
Yeah.
Mhm, yeah.
Just
Because
identifying different cues.
some of our music majors, I know last year, that was a big question for them because they want a performance. They want to hear students playing an instrument. So maybe they have them play a certain selection at the beginning, and then they compare to how they play it after they practice for 2 weeks or whatever. Okay, so let me ask you a question. Has nothing, well, it does, but don't even think about your unit or anything like this. What would you consider to be mastery? If I asked you, what is mastery? What would you tell me? 80%? 70%?
85.
85%? What?
I said at least 85.
At least 85? Okay, so I heard 85, 80, and 70. Are any of those wrong? No, it's really what you consider to be mastery. Now, I guess we could have a huge discussion on, is 50% really, if somebody says 50%, is that really mastery? I mean, so you're saying, okay, they've got to get at least half, but it's okay if they miss half? I mean, we could have a big discussion. We could have a big discussion about 85. You mean they have to get all, if it's 100 points, they have to get all but 15? I mean, we could have discussions back and forth. But just because you think one thing is mastery doesn't mean that everybody has to think that, and that one is wrong and one is right. Now, with whatever you think is mastery, think of your pre-test and your post-test. So you think 70, 80, 85, whatever it is. I'm going to go with 80 just because I'm going to do some problems here in just a minute. So I'm going to go with 80%. That doesn't mean that's the right one, okay? So on my pre-test, I have a bunch of questions. But for goal number 1, I have 4 questions that address goal number 1. So how many questions do students have to get correct out of those 4 for them to be mastery, according to what I said mastery was? I said 80%. 4. Okay, because I heard 3 there first, and 3 is only 75%. Okay, so if 80% is my mastery, they're going to have to get 4 out of 4 correct, and that's okay. That's what's going to go here. Okay, so you know you're saying 80%. Well, if it's 4 questions, you may say, well, okay, I know I said 80%, but I'm gonna back off a little bit and I'm gonna say 75. But if you're stuck on 80 or 85% and you have 4 questions, the only way you can get 80 or 85% is if you get 100. And that's okay. I just need you to understand that. If 80% is my mastery and goal number 2, I only have, bless you, I only have 1 question. What do they have to get? They have to get it right. Because if they get it wrong, that's 0%. If they get it right, I know that's 100% on that learning goal, but I only ask 1 question. Okay, so what I'm not saying is that whatever your mastery level is, you have to have the right amount of questions so that you can get that actual number. That's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying you need to keep in mind that if you only have 1 question for a particular learning goal and your mastery is 80%, they're going to have to get it all right. And that's okay. I mean, that's just the way that works. I just need you to understand that before you start here and say, well, okay, wait a minute. If they only get 1 out of 2, but my mastery is 80%, blah, blah, blah. Yes?
Maybe it is, but
Okay.
I see we have 3 boxes for level of mastery. Obviously, like I think of level of mastery, like my post-assessment, they did this. But there's a box for pre and formative. So is that supposed to like vary?
Okay, so maybe I should have said that, and you're helping me because I should have said this earlier. This column right here is not anticipated. Okay, so because if you're giving a pretest, and I mean you probably are anticipating that they're going to do what? Hopefully they're going to improve after you teach it, but those pretest scores probably aren't going to be very good, are they? I mean, if they are good, you need to find something else to teach. If you give that pretest and you've got, you know, people getting 60, 70, 80, 90%, well, I don't know how much of that you need to teach. Because why do you want to waste 2 weeks on something that they've already done? Now, you could still teach the same concept, but maybe now you get to go more in depth. You didn't think you were going to be able to, you thought you were just going to have to do the cover part, just the very top, but now you can really dig in deep and do more because they know all this little stuff, the factual stuff. Now we can do more. Or you may just have to change it completely. But that's what the pretest is designed to do, is to help you determine, is this good material that I'm teaching? Because I don't want to teach it if they already know it. So it's not, so on anticipated, I would anticipate that they're just not going to do very well on the pretest. But by the post-test, I anticipate that they're gonna do a whole lot better. That may not happen. So this pretty much is going to be in the same ballpark all the way through. Because if you know, if 80% for you is mastery, then do you really say, well, that's only on tests? Or maybe my mastery on a test is 50%, but if it's anything other than a test, then it's 80%. And that, I mean, I don't know.
If I think I understand that, you're saying that last column is the results, like this is what they did?
No, it's
Okay.
what your mastery, that's gonna
That's
be on
what-
another chart,
okay,
yes, it's
okay.
your mastery. So, you know, if there are, and you don't have to put 80, 80, 80, 80, 80, 80.
Yes.
You could put 4 out of 4, or 3 out of 4 is
Okay.
close, so,
Yes.
yeah.
But just to, because I think he's also, for this first learning goal, all 3 of those numbers should be the same.
Mhm.
Just want to make sure you understood that.
Or in that same ballpark. I mean, 80, I know, you may say, well, okay, I'll take 75, but, or maybe you think mastery is 70 to 80. Okay, so you've got a little wiggle room there. But yes, they should pretty much all be the same all the way down. Did you have a hand? No?
No.
Okay. I mean, I know you have a hand, but did it go up as well? Okay. Oh, okay.
As far as like pre-assessment goes, like would it be in bad taste to use like any kind of essay or like really like open response type questions for that? Or, because I mean, they're probably gonna go into that like, no idea.
I won't say it's in bad taste, but I will tell you that at any point in your teaching career, if you're going to give an essay, and you probably have experienced this through your years in school, you need to have a rubric that's pretty defined in order to grade it. Because if you, and I've had instructors before who just, you know, there's nothing on the paper and maybe it says 72. And so you're thinking, oh gosh, I thought this was my best work. So, and you go and you say, why did I get a 72? You just did. You know, there's stuff in there that you didn't do it the way I wanted you to do. But maybe Dr. Watson, there's nothing on his paper, and you know, maybe we work together and his paper pretty much says the same thing mine does, and he got a 92. And so then you get, well, why is his, yeah, da, da, da. Next time you'll do worse than I do. I just let you do better that time.
Let's pay back for
In that
all
example.
the boy examples on Tuesday.
There you go. Oh, that's true. I did, yes. So I would, that way that kind of helps you, and that just gives you some leverage with your students.
Right.
So there's nothing wrong with it, but you're right. You may or may not get what you want.
Right.
Okay. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, I think so.
I was just gonna ask, like, what would, we would do the same thing for formative, I guess?
Yes.
Overall.
Mhm. And that, I mean, that may or may not have a point value to it. You may just.
What if it's like participation?
Okay.
Yes or no? You know what I mean, like, can it be, completed or not completed type of thing? Or is that, like, if they're like working on a project?
I probably would go ahead and put my 80% or whatever, because you're not really, you are identifying what they are, but there's going to be another place in here where you're going to put them. But, you know, at this point, you may or may not even know how many points. You may change it later at the participation, so I'd still stick with my whatever. Yes?
Okay, so like a formative assessment in a lesson, like in a class lesson, often it can be informal or something.
Yes.
Does this have to be formal data, formative assessment for this? Like, as a whole?
No, I mean, it can be informal stuff, especially if you're going to take an informal grade in your grade book, like maybe participation or how they work in groups. You know, do they do whatever their assigned piece was?
Yeah, okay.
So you can put that in there. Yes?
So level of mastery is just what we are holding as our mastery level, not what the students scored.
Correct.
All right.
The student's score will be somewhere else. And this is not anticipated, okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
One of the activities I've project the class do, where they will design a political ad
Okay.
based off of certain elements of propaganda.
Okay.
So, I think, designing a rubric along with it, as opposed to, they include these elements of propaganda, other aspects of delivery, group work, participation. How would I do like a pre-assessment for that?
Well, and that, I wouldn't consider that probably a pre-assessment. I would consider that to be part of your formative that you're doing within the lesson. It's just going to address a particular learning goal. But maybe if a key is, do they know what the word propaganda means? Maybe you put that on your pre-test. Yeah, but I wouldn't put project things like that. I wouldn't put any of those on your pre and your post.
So I would put that in. Okay.
No. Are we good? Okay. Will you scroll down just a little bit? Okay, so again, you've got some narrative and it's talking about your overall assessment plan, et cetera, et cetera. And then there is, okay, right here, it says PACE documents containing formative and summative assessment materials. So these would be, and then the next one says teacher, student directions or something. PACE City assessment directions for student teacher use. So this is where you're going to put those worksheet kind of things, or not worksheets, but they're just pieces of paper, here for us. So we know what you're using. You're going to include your pre and your post. Some people like to include a blank one and one with an answer key. Every now and then someone will say, well, I want to give you an example of a student's copy. That's fine, whatever you choose to put in here, but you do need to at least have one of each. One of each of the activities, pre, post, and all the formative stuff that you're going to do. Now, I'll use the same example I did with the elementary students, but when we did Green and White Day, or some form of Green and White Day, when it was parents and parents and students who came to our groups, we would divide them into parent group and student group, and we had this outline. It looked like a gingerbread man, but it was a teacher. And so what we would do is we would tell them to decorate or do whatever to this person that would be characteristics of a good teacher. So maybe in the brain part they would put knowledgeable, or maybe they would draw a heart and put caring, or whatever. So where in the world was I going? Oh, okay, so I couldn't even remember where I was going. This noise over here, I'm not sure what it is. But so that was a blank sheet of paper with this outline on it. So if I stuck that in this document, my evaluator would have absolutely no idea what in the world that meant, because there are no directions on it. So what I would do here is I would say, the teacher would tell the students to blah, 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 blah. All right? So if you are giving students handouts or whatever that have no directions, and you're including them in your unit, you just want to tell us maybe what you say or what you expect from them. If it's clear, there are directions on it, you don't have to do any of that. Okay? But we want to see, excuse me, all the things that, bless you, that you're doing with your unit, bless you, and that's where they're attached. If you use student copies, please, please, please remove their name. And I'm just going to give you a little tidbit of information that I gave the elementary group the other day. When you do your capstone at the end, please don't use student names, okay? Because evaluators don't like that. So what I told them was, because you're used to calling the students by names, and if you accidentally slip and say, well, Amy in my class, and you're like, oh, I didn't mean to say her name, I'm sorry. No, just say, it's not her real name, that's just a pseudonym, I'm just going to, call her Amy throughout. They'll never know, okay? Although they will know. They don't like that. But you don't want to identify your students, but yes, we all slip and say their name, so just, or make up a name, but then you can't remember what you made up.
So our video
should we specifically cut out the portions that we say their names? Like if
No,
we
no,
don't
no,
want
no,
to
no,
video?
no, because you have permission.
Okay.
What the evaluators don't, they just don't want identifiable information at that point.
Okay.
But no, not in your,
Then
now, so let's, all right, I'm gonna get to the video and then I'll mention something else. Anything about task 3? There are, in the narrative part, there are statements that ask you to analyze, elaborate, describe. Okay, I don't know of anyone that can analyze, describe, or give detailed information in a sentence or two. I'm not saying you have to write 20 paragraphs, but I'm just saying, answer it in as much detail as you can without, you know, going over and over and over and over and over the same thing. Are we good?
How much, like in that section there, how much should we include, like, work samples?
I probably, I mean, if you want to include one student, and sometimes people like to include their focus students,
Yeah.
And that's fine. Again, just make sure.
Right.
You can do one, maybe one on this one and one on the next one, or if you want to include them both, unless whatever it is you're including is like 20 pages long, you don't want to do 40 just on that.
Okay.
And maybe you do a couple, and then if you've got a lot of extra that they're really, really good and you really want the evaluator to look at, just say, I have more examples in the document that's called blah, blah, and attach another file.
Okay.
Because remember, we're at 62 pages and you haven't typed a word in. Oh, but I did want to go back. You said, somebody asked a question and I thought that's where it was going to go and it just hit me. Back on the chart where it has goals, somebody said, I see there are 3 and that's not what you were talking about, but right here there are only 3. If you have 10 goals, all you have to do is just expand this chart, okay? And if you have any trouble doing that, just copy and paste and put, you know, oh, sorry, there's 4, my fault. So you would still have 10, so you need to add 6 more. Just copy and paste, and if you can't get that done, you can call Dr. Watson or email him, and he will help you do that. Are we good? Here's,
Your TPA is not a test of your instructional technology skills for my class.
oh. Well, I don't know what that said, but that's okay. I'm kidding. All right, so task 4, and then I'm going to talk about the video very quickly. Task 4 is just the design for instruction, and this is where you're going to put your lesson plan, or your unit plan, okay? So if you look, it's already there. There are 10 days worth of lesson plans. If your unit is 12 days, then you're going to add 2 more. If you have trouble doing that, you got to hold Dr. Watson. But just copy and paste 2 more, okay? A couple of things to keep in mind here, and it does say it at certain points, but please, please, please do it just like your instructors had you do here. Hopefully they made you highlight. If you don't highlight, it will be sent back to you, okay? Don't make us guess what you're calling teaching strategies or instructional strategies or what you're calling technology or whatever. You tell us what you mean by those. Differentiated instruction. So you do that. So, so it's there for you. Now the one, well, that's in 5. And then you have some narrative statements that you have to address as well. Oh, yes, there is another template here where it talks, this is where you talk about your focus students, okay? So you're going to choose 2 focus students. No, the focus students do not have to have IEPs. No, the focus students do not have to be one gender versus another. No, the focus students do not have to be high and low achievement levels. But you need to choose those focus students with something in mind. I mean, just shutting your eyes and saying, you and you are my focus students, probably that's not going to work. Okay? You need to have some reason why you're choosing them. Maybe you want to do a male and a female and see, you know, I don't know, how they compare because this is a typically female-oriented class or a typically male-oriented, I don't know. Maybe you want to do someone who is high on the achievement scale versus someone who is low on the achievement scale. Maybe you have someone who is very, 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 very quiet and never says a word versus someone who can't sit still and is bouncing all over the walls. But have a reason, don't just say, well, I'm just going to take these two. And you do refer to them as focus student 1 and 2. You'll see in the chart when we get to task 6 where we already have FS1 and FS2 for you. But anyway, here in task 4, just this little template, you're just telling why you chose focus student 1 and focus student 2, and then you're describing, the differentiation that you're doing between them. Okay. Yes.
I do have a question.
Okay.
So I know that we have to fill out like the West Virginia lesson plan for the College of Ed, but where I'm in Ohio, I have to do Ohio lesson plans. So what do I do with that? Do I put those in there, or is that just for that school to know that I'm doing what I'm doing?
So when you say West Virginia, are you talking about standards or are you talking about a whole different template?
The lesson plan that is on the next slide, or like on deck.
Right, for College of
Yeah,
Ed.
I have to fill those out, but also for that school, because I'm in Ohio, I have to fill out Ohio lesson plans. So do I put the Ohio ones in there, or is that just for the school? Yeah, I have to fill out a big Ohio lesson plan too. So I have to do 2 for each one.
I know we've had that before, but we've never had somebody, I don't think, that had to do them with that format.
It's not that format, it's different.
No, I meant the Ohio State, the Ohio one.
No, I have a license for Ohio.
That's what I was going to see how it compares. Will you send a copy of that format, the lesson plan format that you have to use for your Ohio school?
Yeah, I think she sent me it.
Or you can take a picture and
Yeah,
send it.
just
Send it to
send
Mrs. Priest and she'll forward it to me. I'm going to compare and see how closely it relates to ours. And if there's enough there, I mean, I'm not going to make you do 2. That's crazy.
Well,
But
I have another question then,
Okay.
going along with it. So when I do those lesson plans, I have to go by the Ohio standards.
that's the question I thought you were going to ask.
Yeah, so for that one, I have to do their standards, but for this one, I have to do our standards. Now, if I'm putting them both in here, that becomes the result. Am I basing my whole like unit and everything, having to do more objectives and stuff by both of the states?
No.
Okay.
No, I would, what's your content area?
Music.
Okay.
The music the same as
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it shouldn't.
So that's true,
That
that
should be the
shouldn't matter.
Yeah.
Because I don't think, now I don't know about Ohio.
But am I putting
But-
state standards in there or just national standards?
Well, if there are, like West Virginia doesn't, the state standards are the national standards.
They're a little different.
No,
from
they're a little,
music.
okay.
West Virginia
Yeah.
has.
Ohio's are like an exact copy of the national standards.
so
but West
Ohio's are-
Virginia, they reworded them, so
Okay.
they're similar, but a little different.
Also different numbers.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
then them bring
That's
out.
what happened.
Okay, so I'm going to make a call here. I'm going to, is anybody else in a different school, a different state?
She
Oh,
is.
you're the only one?
You're the only
Okay,
one, yeah.
so I'm going to say go ahead and use the Ohio ones.
For in there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Do you not want to?
I mean, it's not that.
Because what I'm going to tell you to do is put a note and say that Dr. Lucas told me to use the Ohio State standards because I'm in an Ohio State school
Okay,
versus West Virginia.
so am I using the Ohio template?
Well, that's what I don't know yet. What I need to see is if there's enough compare, because if it's totally different, our evaluators are used to the West Virginia, it's not even West Virginia, used to ours.
Yeah.
And they're going to be looking for certain things because the rubric is written along these lines. And if yours doesn't say anything about differentiated instruction and I tell you to use that one and it doesn't, Are you set?
I don't, it's set up completely different than that, so.
I just hate for you to have to do two is my issue.
Well, I
But,
know that I have to do both of them, but because each week she turns them into the school. So I have to put exactly what I'm doing with all of the grades, because I have K through 5 and I teach the high school, middle school primer.
okay,
I have to do all
so you have to do Ohio, but why do you say you have to do West Virginia too?
Be for that.
Oh, you're just talking about for this, okay.
Yeah, for those.
Send a copy to Mrs. Priest, even if you have to take a picture with your